Okay, we're going to talk about the stage editor bar within the stage, and that is this bar that runs along the top of the stage. To begin, we're going to open up a scene here that has absolutely no animation in it, and we're just going to start from scratch. Now first, the stage is one of those windows that you can take and you can drag any other part of the interface or just use it as a standalone window in itself. To begin, I'm going to create an animation here so that we have something on our stage, because as you can see, we have absolutely nothing going on here. So I'm just going to come up into my scene and I'm just going to create a quick animation here. I'm going to drag my stage back into its panel. So I'm going to set a keyframe, and then I'm going to take my object and I'm just going to slide it right, and I'm going to set another keyframe. And here within the stage, you can see we now have an animation, and it's represented by a keyframe at the beginning, a keyframe at the end, and a line in between here. And if I wanted to zoom in on my stage, I can use my middle mouse button to go one way to zoom in and use it the other way to zoom out. And if I want to freely move around on the stage, I can just hold down my middle mouse button and move it around like that. Our first button up here, it says add keyframe. So that means I can come into my stage once I have an animation, and I can use my red timeline bar, which is representative of our time here up in this timeline bar, and I can place it wherever I want to add a keyframe, and I can select my animation here and our button becomes active, and I can select add keyframe. When I do that, it adds a keyframe right here. We can click on that keyframe and then further adjust the parameters here. If I wanted to adjust the X, Y, or Z position of our object, I could. So at any place on your timeline, you can add a keyframe. And then next to that, if you wanted to delete a keyframe, you can just highlight a keyframe and there is a delete keyframe button right there. We'll delete that one as well. Now the next button here is called add stop point, and it is grayed out currently. And to get it to active, you need to have a director. And once you have an animation, you will have a director. So here, this default is the director, and I highlight that, and now our add stop point becomes active. And what this means is that we can add a stop point somewhere in the scene and then continue the animation. So our animation right now goes from left to right. If I wanted it just to stop somewhere in the middle, I could add a stop point. I'll do that. I'll click the button. It adds a stop point, and it gives us a blue triangle with a black bar that goes down through the animation. That means when we are going to play the animation now, from the beginning, we hit play, and it stops right at that stop point. Now we need to come up to our timeline and use the continue animation for it to go continue to the end. If I want to get rid of this stop point, I just highlight it, it becomes orange, and now I have a delete this tag or stop point, and it gets rid of it. Next, we have our linear left and right, and these refer to the keyframes. So as I select a keyframe, they become active, and we can make this linear left and right, which makes our keyframe linear on both sides, the left and the right, which means we'll have no handles down here. And since we are in the dope/spline view, we can see both our animation and our splines down here. We also have an option for smooth left, linear right for that particular keyframe, which makes the left smooth and the linear right. And we also have the option for linear left and smooth right. And as you move your spline view down, you'll be able to see the handles down here. We also have a smooth left and a smooth right. When we switch to that, we can grab our handles here, and then we can make further adjustments to the animation. So with our handles drug out a little bit more and you hit the play animation, you can see how that affects the animation, and it kind of eases it into the out point keyframe. Next, we have switch handles to tangential, and this will switch both handles to tangential. But again, you still have the option to come down here, grab the handles, and move it however you want. Also, since we have our bounding box active, we could come up to our scene editor window and also grab these handles and the tangents and make changes this way as well. And since it is real time, you make a change, you hit play, and you'll see it real time when it plays out. Now I'm just going to go ahead and add a keyframe here. I'm going to place my timeline marker, and we're going to add one more keyframe. We're going to give that keyframe a name so we can click on it. It highlights it. we have an option down here in the right that we can give this keyframe a name. So I'm just going to type in a name here. I'm going to select a different keyframe. Now up in our stage editor bar, we have a search option. So we could search the name for a specific keyframe. In this case, I'm looking for A1. I can type in A1 and I can say go, and it's going to highlight that keyframe named A1. We also have 4 buttons over here. Once we have our search in there, we could go in there and say find previous keyframe, find next keyframe, find first keyframe, or find last keyframe. Now, as I mentioned, you can zoom in and out using your mouse button, but there are options over here too. There is an option to zoom to standard. When I click on that, it's going to zoom back to the standard mode in the stage. And then there's also a zoom to whole spline. We can click that and it zooms into the spline. Next to that, we have our show splines. We have a show spline 1, show spline 2, and a show spline 3. Currently, only show spline 1 is active. These splines refer to animations performed on various axes. So if only one axis is animated, only the one spline option is available. And that's why we only have one option here. If I come up into my scene editor and I add some additional animation here, so for instance, let me add a rotation. So I will rewind our timeline. I'm going to set a keyframe, and I'm just going to add a rotation on all 3 angles here of our sphere, on the X, on the Y, and the Z, and I'm going to hit update keyframe. Now I'm going to come down into my rotation, and we can zoom to standard. Here's our rotation animation, and I want to show spline 1, and when I do that, it shows me the options for that spline down here. And then if I want to show spline 2, it shows me the Y animation, and spline 3 represents the Z animation. So each spline describes a rotation around a particular axis. And in this case, axis 1 is X, axis 2 is Y, axis 3 is Z. And if you needed to access those 3 splines, you could do it by changing the 1, 2, or 3. Now next to that, we have an animate timeline marker, and this animates the timeline marker along our dope sheet editor here. So if we hit play, that timeline marker moves. If you don't want it to move, you turn that animate timeline marker off. Now when performance is an issue, this option should be disabled so their timeline is not playing whenever it's in the spline or dope sheet view. The next button next to that is the show info button. We had it off, but if you have it turned on, what it means is when you roll over any keyframe or anything within the stage, it's going to give you a little information box, and here it shows us keyframe at 0 seconds. If we roll over our animation, it tells us channel rotation from 0 seconds to 7.14 seconds. And then if we roll over our keyframe, it gives us additional information for that one as well. If you don't want to see it, you just turn that little I button off. Next to that, we have our options to set up our timeline. So right now we have it set to seconds, and that's represented by these numbers here. If I change it to frames, we get a new set of numbers, and then we can also change it to fields as well. Generally, I like to work in seconds. We also have an option for the grid here. I can turn that grid on or off, and when I turn it on, it gives us these lines, and again we can zoom in. We also have a snap to grid right here. When snap to grid is on, I can grab my keyframe and it snaps to individual lines on here. When we turn snap to grid on, we also have our grid width here, so we could increase our grid width or decrease our grid width to whatever we need. So it's set to 20 now, and now with our snap to grid, it's only going to snap to these intervals at 20 seconds. So the thing with the snap to grid, and it's set to 20, if it is set to that, it's only going to move to 20, and you can't move anywhere in between. So just be aware, if it is set to snap, you just need to make sure your numbers here match what you need to do. And if you don't want to worry about the snapping at all, you just turn it off and you don't need to do it. So that's what each one of these buttons does within the stage editor bar.